Okay. It is much better than Gotham Knight in every single way, shape, and form. But compared to how much I loved Green Lantern First Flight, this was pretty disappointing. Not to mention, it was forced to be promotion for the live action movie. Yeah, we all know the story there. I'm not going any further. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animation Station, your number one stop decision for anything and everything animation. Welcome back to DC Live, and welcome to Green Lantern Emerald Knights, the second of the 3 Green Lantern solo movies in the DC Animated Universe pantheon. The other one being Beware My Power, which we won't get to review this year, because that one literally came out last year, and I sadly missed it. So, yeah, next year I'll talk about it, don't worry. And while this is another animated DC movie, honestly, I don't really feel like I have to do an in-depth analysis on this one. I mean, I'll briefly talk about the 7 stories that are involved here. I'll talk about the voice actors, as I always do, and what I liked and disliked about it. So, I'm not going to go like full deep dive spoiler stuff, so this isn't going to be as long or as drawn out as my All-Star Superman review was, but it's still going to be decently analytical. So, you guys can hold your breath. This one shouldn't take any more than 20 minutes plus. 20 minutes tops. So, let's start with the voice cast, as we always do. And the voice cast of this one is friggin' stacked beyond belief. Like, absolutely stacked. In this one movie, we had Nathan Fillion, Jason Isaacs, Elizabeth Moss, Henry Rollins. Yes, that's Henry Rollins. Tony Amendola, Steve Bloom, Grey Griffin. Yes, the voice of Daphne from Scooby-Doo. Kelly Hu, David Kaufman, Roddy Piper, yes, the wrestler Roddy Piper. Andrea Romano, Bruce Thomas, James Arnold Taylor. Like, the cast in this is freaking stacked, and all of them did a pretty good job, especially one I want to shout out in particular that is actually getting a second chance to play a Green Lantern in the upcoming Superman Legacy movie, is Nathan Fillion. He's the voice of Hal Jordan here. And no, it's not the same guy that voiced him in First Flight, which actually is something I should point out about my First Flight review that I forgot to mention, is that he is played by the dude from Criminal Minds in that first movie. I forgot to point it out. I feel stupid for not doing so, and I apologize. But Nathan Fillion here is a really good Hal Jordan. Like, yeah, he is a bit flat, but he's not really given a whole lot to do at the same time, as he's very much the wraparound story character, where the star of the movie is its stories and its episodic anthology format. So, with what it has to work with, it does a really, really good job. Like, seriously, Nathan Fillion is a really good Hal Jordan, and I'm really interested to see how he's going to do Guy Gardner. Like, seriously, really well done to him. Then we have Jason Isaacs as Sinestro, another recast that wasn't in First Flight. But he's pretty good, and if you're wondering why doesn't Sinestro turn evil in this one, it's again because it's saddled with having to promote the live-action movie that came out 2 years later in 2011, so for that reasoning, it had to make sure that Sinestro was a good guy for this one. Unlike the last one where he was such an over-the-top villain, it was a blast to watch, but here he's kind of just there. He's pretty good, but Jason Isaacs sadly isn't given a whole lot to work with. He sounds really good and does give a good performance, but just doesn't have a lot to work with. Then there's Elizabeth Moss. Yes, that's Elizabeth Moss, as the voice of the rookie of the movie that Hal Jordan is telling all these stories to, Aricia. And she's pretty good in the movie. I actually really like her character, even though she doesn't really get to do a whole lot to the very end, but she's a fascinating character that I would like to see more of. So she's pretty cool. Henry Rollins is the voice of Kilowog, another recast from First Flight. And honestly, I think it's slightly better than the guy from First Flight. The guy that voiced him in First Flight was by no means bad, but he was a bit generic. But here, I really liked his voice acting, and he did a really good job with his performance. I mean, it's Henry freaking Rollins. What do I need to say? Then there's Arnold Vosloo as Abin Sur, who is pretty good. He's in one story towards the very end, but he does really good with the little bit he's given. Tony Amendola is the voice of Kentor. He's pretty good. Steve Bloom is back again for the second time as the voice of Kloba Vud, or Vood, however you pronounce that. He does pretty good. Not given a whole lot to work with, though. Then we have Ryu, who's voiced by Gray Griffin. No, not Ryu as in Street Fighter, as in REE''YU. A little minor villain in one of the stories, but she's really good. I mean, it's Gray Griffin. She's a absolute voice acting legend. I do not need to say anything more. Kelly Hu voices Lara. She does a great job in the one story that she gets, having to, conflict with upholding her honor of this family that she comes from, while also trying to uphold her new high standards as a Green Lantern. Like, really good performance, and she does a great job in the one story that she gets. She does a great job. Then there's Michael Jackson. No, it's not the Michael Jackson you're thinking of. It's a different guy. He's the voice of Ganthet. He's okay. Then there's Peter Jessup as the voice of Salak. He's okay. David Kaufman as Ruben's pretty good. Sunil Malhotra as Balfunga's ship, as in the AI that talks to Balfunga during the story of him and Mogo, is pretty good. But again, it's an AI for a ship. He doesn't really get to do much. Rowdy Roddy Piper is the voice of Balfunga himself, and he does a spectacular job in his performance. Like, I really bought him as his character. I didn't even realize it was him until I looked on this IMDb page. Like, he does a great job. He really does a great freaking job as the character. Seriously, great job. Then we have Andrea Romano back again as Avensur's Ring. Little minor voice, but I mean, it's Andrea Romano. She does a great job. Not to mention, she's still the voice director. So, yeah, you can definitely expect quality. Jane Singer as Watch It's Okay. Doesn't really get to do Walkette, whatever. Doesn't really get to do much. James Arnold Taylor is the voice of Tomari. He's pretty good. And then there's Bruce Thomas as Atrocitus, who is pretty good for the little bit that he gets. Like, he's only in about 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, but he gives this really haunting monologue as he's talking with Adam Sur as he's being arrested. Like, sends chills down your spine. It's really good. So yeah, voice cast here is stacked, and they all put in really good performances. Shame, though, they don't have a lot to work with, because the writing in this one's not very good. It's not terrible by any means. I'm not trying to diss anyone, but Michael Green, Mark Guggenheim, and Peter Tomasi, the writing just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's hard to really articulate and explain. It just really doesn't work. But the animation's still really good, and I do like how this one, despite having to be saddled with that live-action bomb wreckage, it still stayed consistent and used the same art style and animation as First Flight, if a bit more flat. But it still looks really good, and if you watch the two back-to-back, it could definitely fool you into thinking it's a sequel, but it's not. It's its own separate thing. It just uses the same animation style. So, yeah, that one's pretty good. The story itself is pretty interesting, and I do like all the stories themselves that we get told throughout. I especially love Lara's in particular. Like, that story really got me. Like, that's when I thought, oh, this movie's getting really good now. And then it kind of dropped off a bit. And then I like the Balfunga and Moga story pretty good as well. And I especially really like Kilowog's story, where we kind of get to see why he becomes such the tough as nails bruiser we all know him for. Like, he's pretty good. I like his story. And the wraparound story is okay. It feels like it doesn't really have a lot of room to breathe or develop because it's the wraparound, not the main focus. So it doesn't really get a whole lot to do and work with, but for what it is, it's really good and really solid. And I do like most of the stories. I don't hate any of the stories here. They're all really fascinating, and they add to this world building of this Green Lantern, section of the DC universe that they create. It's really interesting. Not to mention, according to the end credits, each one of the stories from this movie is based on a different storyline from the comic books. That's a really nice touch, and explains why I like them so much. But yeah, that one's pretty good. I do like the anthology format of the movie. Problem is, the wraparound segment's not great, and what was my other complaints? Let me bring up my written review real quick. I'm not going to read the whole thing, I just don't remember all my thoughts on this movie. Mediocre writing. Oh, the pacing. Yeah, the pacing of this movie sucks. It is way too freaking slow. Like, just way too slow. Like, it just moves at a stagnant, slow pace, and you feel almost every single second of that runtime. Like, it's weird. It makes it feel longer than it actually is. The movie's only like, what, an hour and... Let me see here. About an hour and 20 minutes. But watching the movie, it kind of felt like it was double that, like 2 hours and 40 minutes, because it dragged on for so long. Like, I just feel like the pacing could have been just a tad bit faster. But that's just a minor complaint, honestly. It's a very minor complaint, but it does really hamper the experience when you're actually watching it. Like, it's fascinating. I don't hate this movie by any means, but that pacing really ruins a lot of its potential. So that's my pros, that's my cons, that's the voice cast, that's my thoughts on the stories. What are my overall thoughts on the movie? It's a fascinating watch, but I can't really say it has much rewatch value. I don't think it's a piece of garbage like a lot of people online are saying, but it's not anything extraordinary either. First Flight was far better than this because it was more focused and self-contained, whereas here it's more of an anthology tale trying to adapt so many different comic book storylines at once. Again, also trying to act as promotion for the movie that would come out 2 years later, and yeah, you know the whole story about that bomb wreckage, but point is, this is still pretty decent. It's way better than that crappy live-action movie it was forced to coincide with, but it's not anything spectacular, and in the grand scheme of things with this DC animated universe pantheon, it's pretty weak. But I would still say it's worth at least one watch, especially if you are a fan of Green Lantern and have read these stories in the comic books. They are really faithful to those comics, from at least what I've been able to tell, but it's definitely a movie that's a one and done at best. It's worth watching one time if you're a fan of the actual source material, but outside of that, it's just not very good. And I hate to say that, but I really loved First Flight. That movie is easily rewatchable for me. This one is very much a one and done. But if you feel differently, that's perfectly okay. Final verdict for Green Lantern Emerald Knight is going to be a disappointing but solid 6 out of 10. It is a decent movie. It has a really good concept. It has great world building and some excellent voice performances. But it's dragged down by its mediocre writing and agonizingly awful slow pace. It's worth a watch, but I don't see a lot of rewatch value out of this one. And that's a real shame. But like I said, way better than the crappy live-action piece of garbage that it was forced to coincide and promote. So, yeah, it definitely has that going for it. Well, that's going to do it for this review. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And wow, it took actually less than 20 minutes to get through that. I'm surprised. But, yeah, this one doesn't really need a deep dive analysis. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're a fan of Green Lantern, give it one watch and see what you think. And if you're not, just don't bother. It's not for you. But what is up next? Well, tomorrow's going to be a pretty busy day, because you have my crossover review of The Dark Knight. I know a lot of you are probably really curious about my thoughts on that movie, and may or may not peeve you off a little bit. And then you have a Batman double feature, because we have 2 more Batman movies on top of Dark Knight to review tomorrow. So you're getting a big Cape Crusader triple feature with Dark Knight, Batman Year One, and the final of the Batman animated series movies, Mystery of the Batwoman. I've never seen it before, so it'll be a very interesting watch. But, yep, that's going to do it for this review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Jet Small of Animation Station, and I'll see you tomorrow for The Dark Knight.